There's a guy on a warehouse floor somewhere in Ohio who has more influence over how that building runs than the three people whose titles say they're in charge. Nobody voted him in. Nobody promoted him into the job. He started acting like the outcome was his problem before anyone told him that it was. And now the whole floor moves on his word. Titles get you a chair at the table. Influence gets you listened to once you're in it. Today, we're breaking down how that gap gets built and how you close it starting in whatever seat you're sitting in right now. Welcome back to Toby Talks. I'm Toby Hoy, and this episode is for anyone who has sat in a meeting, seen exactly what needed to happen, and then said nothing because your title didn't feel big enough to say it out loud. Maybe you're 2 years into a role and watched a decision get made that you knew with total confidence was going to backfire. Maybe you're running your own business and still hesitate to tell a vendor exactly what you need because some part of you thinks you haven't earned the right to be that direct yet. Maybe you're new to the workforce, sitting in your first internship, watching everyone around you seem more entitled to speak up than how you feel. All of those are different situations, but on the same block. You're treating influence as something issued to you rather than something that you build starting today. Here's what we're covering in this episode. Two people at the same company in the same week with the same set of problems. One got promoted to manager and can't get anyone to follow her lead. The other has never held a management title, and the entire building defers to him without being asked to. We'll break down what separates each one from the other, because it isn't talent and it isn't tenure. It's a specific, learnable set of behaviors, and you can start using those today in whatever role you're already in. One quick note before we dive in, this isn't an argument against titles or promotions. Titles matter. They come with resources, decision rights, and a scope of responsibility that some work genuinely requires. This is an argument against waiting for the title before you start practicing the behaviors that make it worth having. Pursue the title if it's right for your path. Build the influence either way. Let's start our conversation today with someone named Danielle. 4 years as a shift supervisor at a mid-sized manufacturing company before she got promoted to floor manager. 4 years of showing up early, covering shifts that nobody wanted, keeping her head down, and trusting the system to notice. Eventually, it did. She got the title, she got the raise, and the office with a door that closes. She told me that she genuinely believed the hard part was over, that the promotion was the finish line for a race that she had been running for 4 years. That belief is common, and it's wrong in a way that quietly wrecks a lot of new managers before they understand what happened. The promotion doesn't come with influence attached. It comes with authority attached, and those are two very different things. Danielle found that out in her first week. Her first big call was simple on paper. A production line ran a changeover process that added 20 minutes of downtime every shift, and she wanted to switch to a faster method that cut that time almost in half. She emailed her team and walked them through it in a quick meeting. Everyone nodded. Everyone said it sounded great. And then everyone kept doing it the old way. Not out of malice or rebellion. They didn't believe it because Danielle hadn't done anything yet to earn belief. She had a title, but not a track record with these specific people in this role. One team member later admitted the general feeling on the floor was, let's just see if this works before we change how we've always done it. Nobody said that directly to Danielle's face. It showed up as quiet noncompliance, the kind that's almost impossible to call out because nobody is technically refusing anything. She tried again, more forcefully this time, telling the team that the new process was mandatory starting on Monday. Compliance went up, but buy-in did not. People followed the letter of the instruction and cut corners in ways that ate most of the time savings anyway. Danielle got what a title gets you. People doing what you say while you're watching. She didn't get what influence gets you. People doing it because they believe in it. One afternoon, she watched two employees switch back to the old method the moment that they thought she'd left the area. Less like being disobeyed, more like being politely humored, which was worse because open defiance at least gives you something that you can address directly. 6 weeks in, Danielle had a title that nobody argued with and a floor that quietly worked around her. That's the gap. A title compels compliance. It doesn't compel commitment. If you've ever wondered why a manager who's clearly working hard still can't get their team to move, this is usually why. They skipped the step where trust gets built and went straight to expecting obedience. One of her longest tenured employees, 11 years on the floor, pulled her aside one day and said, not unkindly, "Hey, we're not trying to make this hard for you. We don't know yet if you're going to stick with it the way you say you will." That comment landed harder than the quiet resistance had because it named the real issue, not her intelligence or her plan, but her follow through. The one thing that can't be faked, only demonstrated over time. That's the clearest definition of the gap that this episode is all about. A title tells people what you're allowed to decide. It says nothing about whether you'll still be standing behind that decision 3 months from now, or whether you understand the reality that you're now responsible for. Danielle's team wasn't being difficult. They were being accurate. She hadn't earned the benefit of the doubt yet, and pretending otherwise wouldn't have manufactured it any faster. Let's move on to Greg. He works on the same floor that Danielle manages. 9 years in, he's never applied for a supervisory role. If you ask him why, he shrugs. He likes being close to the work. But when there's a real problem, a machine that's acting strange, or a batch that just doesn't look right, or a new hire about to make a costly mistake, people don't go and find Danielle first. They go and find Greg. That reputation didn't happen overnight, and most people underestimate how long it takes. His first 2 or 3 years, nobody treated him differently than anyone else. Just a solid worker with a good attendance record. The shift happened slowly, in moments too small to make a highlight reel on their own. Somewhere in year 3, he noticed a supplier had quietly changed a raw material spec, something that was only obvious if you'd handled the material with your hands for years. He flagged it before it caused a quality problem. In year 5, he trained a new hire so thoroughly that 3 years later, they still credit him by name. In year 7, he caught a scheduling conflict that would have left a critical shift uncovered on a holiday weekend, 3 months before anyone would have noticed. None of those things were dramatic alone, but stacked over 9 years. It became a reputation that nobody would talk him out of. One specific afternoon tells you everything about how that kind of influence gets built and defended in real time. A packaging machine started running slightly off. Not broken, not stopped, only off. Greg noticed the sound had changed, a difference that most people wouldn't even register. He watched it for 2 minutes and then pulled the line. If you've ever worked in a factory, you know that pulling a line isn't a small decision. It costs real money every minute the line is down. And a newer employee doing it without authorization would have been an entirely different problem. Greg didn't ask permission, and nobody questioned him because 9 years of consistency had made his judgment more trusted than most people's certainty. If Greg pulled the line needed to be pulled. At the end of the day, he was right. A bearing was failing. The kind of failure that would have taken the whole line down for 2 days if it had gone on for another hour. He caught it in 2 minutes. A 20-minute fix instead of a 2-day disaster because one person had spent 9 years becoming someone whose word didn't need a title behind it. Greg has never managed anyone. He has no formal authority to pull a line, but he did it anyway, and everyone let him because influence had already made the authority question irrelevant. Real influence doesn't wait for permission. It gets built by people who act like their judgment matters before anyone officially confirms that it does. The machine story is the dramatic one. There's a quieter example as well. Two employees got into a running dispute over shift assignments, the kind of low-grade conflict that just poisons morale without ever showing up on a report. Danielle tried mediating it formally in her office and got nowhere. Greg never had a formal conversation about it. He talked to each of them separately on the floor during normal work and asked what they needed instead of what they were angry about. Within a week, the schedule worked itself out. Nobody assigned him that task. He treated it as his to help solve. The same instinct aimed at people instead of equipment. Swap out the machine for a spreadsheet with a formula error, quietly corrupting a forecast for 3 months. Swap out the bearing for a client contract with a clause that nobody read closely enough. Swap out Greg for the analyst 2 desks down who catches things before they get expensive. Every workplace has a Greg. Every workplace also has people who would become a Greg and don't because they've decided that role belongs to someone with more seniority. It doesn't. It belongs to whoever decides to start acting like it's theirs. A listener of the show, a financial analyst that was 2 years out of college, told me her version of the same story. She noticed a recurring rounding error in a quarterly report template that was quietly inflating one region's numbers for over a year. She might have flagged that quietly to her manager and let it disappear into a queue somewhere. Instead, she built a one-page comparison, walked it directly to the finance director before the next board deck went out, and stated plainly what needed to change and why. The finance director remembered her name. 18 months later, she was the internal hire for a team lead opening over 2 other candidates with more tenure. It's the same pattern as Greg. Different building, but same behaviors. So how do you become a Greg? There are 3 specific behaviors. Not magic, not charisma, but a pattern of behaviors. And patterns get copied. Behavior number 1. Greg ties everything he says to what people around him already care about. He didn't say something felt off with the machine. He said, if we don't stop this now, we lose the whole line for 2 days. Translating his observation into the consequence that mattered to everyone listening. Danielle's changeover email talked about process efficiency. Nobody on that floor loses sleep over process efficiency. They care about their shift ending on time. She was speaking a different language than the one her team generally cared about. And that gap is where her message got lost. You can apply this behavior today. Before you raise a problem, ask yourself what the person listening already loses sleep over. A client doesn't lose sleep over your process improvements. They lose sleep over their deadline. A product designer doesn't care who did which slide in the proposal deck. They care that the final product works. Translate your observation into their existing worry every single time. Behavior number 2. Greg is consistent under pressure, not only when things are calm. Anyone seems trustworthy on a slow, random Tuesday. He's been right during actual emergencies more than once, and in front of people who remember. That's what track record means. A series of moments where someone watched you perform under stakes and filed that result away. Danielle hadn't had that moment yet with this team, which is why her instructions got nodded at and ignored. Trust doesn't transfer across roles the way that authority does. You bring your title with you when you're promoted. You don't bring your credibility. That gets rebuilt every single time in front of the people you're now leading. This behavior is uncomfortable because showing up for the hard moment, the 2 a.m. call, the upset client, the group project falling apart the night before, is harder than showing up when things are all puppies, rainbows, and kittens. But those are the moments that people remember. Stop looking for comfortable ways to demonstrate reliability and start looking for the uncomfortable ones. Nobody remembers the status update meeting that you attended on time, but everyone remembers the crisis that you showed up for. Behavior number 3 is Greg speaks with certainty instead of asking permission to have an opinion. He didn't say, I think we should maybe consider stopping the machine. He said, stop the line. 3 words, no hedge. Certainty isn't arrogance, it's respect. It tells people that you've done the thinking already, so that they don't have to untangle a hedge just to find your point. Every qualifier trains the room to discount you just a little bit more until they stop weighing what you say at all. Count how many times this week where you've softened a real conclusion into a suggestion out of habit rather than genuine uncertainty. Most people are shocked at the number. The fix isn't recklessness. It's doing the thinking privately first and then delivering the conclusion plainly instead of narrating your doubt out loud. None of these 3 behaviors requires a title. None of them requires authority. They're available to you today in the role that you're already in. There's a compounding effect, easy to miss when you look at one moment at a time. The first time that you practice one of these, almost nothing happens. The 10th time, people start to notice a pattern. The 50th time, spread across months, your read on a situation starts getting weighed differently before anyone consciously decides to treat you that way. And that is how Greg ended up with 9 years of trust, a title would never manufacture overnight. Influence compounds the way that trust in any relationship does, slowly, rather than all at once. Before we get to how Danielle turned things around, let's name the objections that are running through your head right now. Because unnamed, they will talk you out of everything that we've covered so far. The first one, I'm not senior enough for people to take this seriously. Seniority and influence are not the same currency, and treating them as interchangeable keeps talented, observant people invisible for years. Greg wasn't senior when he started building his reputation. He was junior, watching carefully, saying what he noticed plainly instead of waiting for a title to authorize it. Seniority might make people listen faster the first time. It's never been required for people to listen at all. Ask yourself honestly, was that observation wrong or just unfamiliar coming from someone in your chair? Secondly, what if going direct makes my manager feel undermined? This one is a real risk. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But there's a difference between going around someone to make yourself look better and recognizing a moment where speed matters more than protocol, and then being transparent about it afterward. Telling your manager exactly what you did and why right after you do it. That transparency is what separates building trust from burning a bridge. Excuse number 3, what if I speak with certainty and I'm wrong? You will be, sometimes. Greg has been wrong before too. He just doesn't lead with those stories. None of us do. The fix isn't permanent hedging. It's doing the work before you speak. Certainty is earned through preparation, not personality. Being occasionally wrong is the cost of playing at this level, and it is significantly smaller than the cost of never playing at all. The risk of speaking up is visible and it's immediate. The awkward silence, the raised eyebrow, but the risk of staying quiet is invisible and compounds for years, which is exactly why it's easy to underweight. Nobody feels the sting of the promotion that quietly went to someone more visible. It happens quietly while you're protecting yourself from a much smaller temporary discomfort. Things like, this isn't who I am. I'm not naturally direct. None of these three behaviors require you to become loud or extroverted. Greg isn't a loud person. He's quiet and methodical. And what he does say, he says plainly at the moment that it matters. Directness isn't the same as volume. You build every one of these from a generally quiet personality. What you can't build them from is silence at the moments that count. One more thing, and I'll state it plainly. None of this is about becoming somebody that people can't stand working with. Influence built through manipulation or self-promotion doesn't hold up in the way that genuine influence does. Greg's influence works because it's aimed at good outcomes for the people around him, not his own visibility. The moment this shifts from serving the outcome to serving your own image, people notice, and the trust erodes as fast as it was built. Build it for the right reasons, and it lasts. Build it as a performance, and it collapses the first time that someone sees through it. Let's go back to Danielle. Her story doesn't end with her stuck in the muck. About 2 months in, after watching Greg operate and feeling more than a little embarrassed by how differently her instructions landed, she made a specific change. She stopped leading with process language and started leading with consequence language. Instead of, we're switching to a faster changeover method, she said, if we cut this changeover time, every one of you gets an extra 20 minutes at the end of shift. That's the same information, but a completely different reception, because now it was tied to something that her team genuinely cared about. She started showing up for the hard moments instead of only the scheduled ones. A line went down at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, and that's the kind of call that every manager dreads. Her old instinct would have been to handle it by phone from bed. This time, she got up, got dressed, and drove into the plant. She wasn't the one who actually fixed the machine, a maintenance tech did, but she stood on the floor at 2:40 in the morning, right next to her team. And 3 people mentioned that night to her weeks later, unprompted, as the moment that something shifted. She also dropped the hedges. Instead of, I think we might want to try this, she said, here's what we're going to do and why. It felt uncomfortable the first time, like she was pretending to have more certainty than she actually had. But certainty, as a practice, doesn't require you to feel certain internally first. It requires doing the thinking and then communicating the conclusion plainly, instead of narrating your doubt out loud. She did experience resistance. A senior team member pushed back directly in a meeting, questioning whether she was overstepping by making calls without running them past the plant manager first. Old Danielle would have backed off to avoid the friction. This time, she held her ground, explained her reasoning, and let the decision stand. That single moment did more for her credibility than the previous 2 months combined. She almost quit around month 3. She sat in her car in the parking lot one evening, quietly questioning whether she was cut out for the role at all. What changed her mind wasn't a pep talk. It was a plant manager who'd been through the same thing years early. Nobody arrives in a leadership role with trust already built. The people who make it aren't the ones who never doubt themselves in that parking lot. They're the ones who go back in the next morning and keep making these specific, unglamorous choices that add up to something real. 6 months later, Danielle's floor runs the process that she originally proposed. Not because she finally forced compliance hard enough, but because she finally built, on purpose, the same trust that Greg built by accident over 9 years, compressed into a much shorter window. Influence isn't a personality trait some people have and others don't. It's a set of repeatable choices, and the timeline shrinks the moment that you stop waiting for a title to hand it to you and start practicing the behaviors directly. Danielle told me one more thing before we wrapped up. The biggest shift wasn't in how her team saw her. It was in how she saw herself. Once she acted like her judgment mattered before waiting for proof that it did, the job stopped feeling like something she was performing and started feeling like something that she owned. The title had been true on paper for 6 months before it felt true in her head. What closed that gap wasn't time. It was the deliberate practice of the behaviors that we've walked through today. Here's how you can start to put this into practice in the next 7 days. Because an idea in your head without action rarely survives past the end of the episode. Identify one problem that you see clearly that the people above you on the org chart haven't fully connected yet. Not a vague frustration, but a specific, nameable issue with a specific consequence. Write it down the way Greg would say it, not the way a cautious version of Danielle would write it in an email full of qualifiers. Bring it directly to the person who will act on it, not the person most likely to agree with you. In person or by phone where possible, but not buried in a long email thread. Tie it explicitly to something that they already care about, the way that Greg tied his observation to the lost line for 2 days. Say what you think should happen next, plainly, without 3 qualifiers stacked in front of it. You don't have to be right about the exact solution, but you do have to be clear about your read on the situation and confident enough to state it without retreating the moment that someone raises an eyebrow. If you run your own business, this might be telling a client that the timeline they're asking for isn't realistic, instead of quietly overpromising, knowing that you're going to underdeliver. If you're a student, it might mean telling your group that the project direction won't hold up, instead of going along with the flow until 2 days before the deadline. If you're in a corporate role, it might mean walking a documented risk directly to the person who will act on it, instead of sending one email and calling your conscience clear. Do this once and it feels exposed. Do it repeatedly and it becomes the reputation that makes the title a formality instead of a prerequisite. A quick recap on what we've covered today. A title compels compliance, not commitment. And commitment is what moves a team. Danielle had the title and got compliance. Greg never had a title and had commitment from an entire floor, earned one high-stakes moment at a time. There are 3 behaviors that build that commitment. Tie your point to what people already care about, stay consistent under pressure, and speak with certainty once you've done the thinking. Neither Greg nor Danielle was more talented than the other. Danielle started later and by accident instead of on purpose. You don't have to either. Titles get you a chair at the table. Influence gets you listened to once you're in it. Find one moment this week where you see something clearly and say it plainly, instead of waiting for a title that would only formalize something already true today. If this episode hit something for you, read the companion blog post at toby-talks.com. It walks through a different, real-world example of exactly how this plays out, with a structure that pairs well with this week's challenge. If you know someone convinced that their title is too small to matter, send them this episode. It's not permission, it's proof that they never needed it. New topics drop every week here at Toby Talks, covering leadership, process improvement, and professional development, always built around specific, practical decisions instead of vague inspiration. Subscribe or follow wherever you're listening and read the full library at toby-talks.com. Remember that influence without authority isn't a trick for getting ahead faster, though it'll do that too. It's a decision about who you're being while you wait for the title to catch up to work that you're already capable of. Most people spend that wait small and cautious. You don't have to. Keep showing up like the outcome is already yours to own, because eventually everyone starts treating it that way too. Until next time, I'm Toby Hoy. This has been Toby Talks, and go lead, go improve, and go grow.